Hello, in this video I'd like to give an overview of Worldox security as far as how it goes to documents and files saved in your Worldox system. So first I'm going to start off with some slides and I'm going to move on to WD Admin and to Active Directory and show you a few things in there. First, with the security overview, I like to think of you have three levels of security when it comes to blocking or allowing users access to documents and files within Worldox. The first level is at the cabinet level. So determining whether you want to block or allow a user's access to a cabinet and all the documents and files that reside in that cabinet. The next is once you have access to a cabinet, you can use ethical walls to control access to a folder or subfolders worth of documents in that cabinet. Then when you get down to the actual file or document level, you can place security on the actual document to control access to that file or document and what users can do with it. So those would be your three levels. Now at the cabinet level security, that controls if a user has access to a cabinet or not. Now if a user has been blocked from a cabinet, some things you need to be aware of, you cannot use an ethical wall to give that user access to a folder under that blocked cabinet. So we see scenarios like this where they have an HR cabinet. We've blocked all the users except for the HR department from the HR cabinet, but we have this one folder in HR where we're going to put the employee handbook or benefits guides or other documents we want the users to have access to. Can we set up an ethical wall to allow the users into that one folder? And the answer is no. Once you've blocked them at the cabinet level, you cannot create an ethical wall to bypass that cabinet block and allow them into a subfolder. So in a situation like that, what you might want to do is take your finalized like employee handbook or benefits guide, other documents like that, and place them in a cabinet that all the users have access to under a HR specific folder in that cabinet, rather than trying to work them in somehow into a cabinet that has been blocked from them. So just so you know, you'll run into that type of situation. Another thing is you cannot assign file security to give that user access to a file they've been blocked to the cabinet. So you can't say, well, Sue or Joe's been blocked from the HR cabinet, but there's this one document that we want them to have access to, so I'll just put document security on it and give Sue and Joe access to that document. That's not going to work because they're being blocked at the cabinet level. They're not going to be allowed to get into the cabinet to even get to that document, even though you put that type of security on it. So once you block them at the cabinet level, you can't use one of the lower levels of security to allow them past that. Then you have ethical walls, and these are folder level security. It controls if a user has access to a folder or not within that cabinet. Now, if a user has been blocked from a folder via an ethical wall, you cannot assign file security to give that user access to a file under that blocked folder. So same thing like where you blocked them from the cabinet and you tried to give them access through one of the lower controls. Same thing here. If you block them from a folder, you can't put document security on a document in that blocked folder to say that that user has access to it. It's not going to let them have access to it because they're being blocked at the folder at that higher level. So they're not going to be able to get through that to get to the document. So once you block them at a higher level, you can't use a lower level to let them bypass it. Now on file level security, by default, all files saved in Worldox are public. So if users have access to the cabinet and they have access to the folder it's saved in, then they're going to have full permissions to that file. But you can place security on the file itself to control who has access to it and what type of permissions they have. And that would be your file level security. Now we also have the ability to turn on Worldox Active Directory integration. Now by default, it's turned off. You have to activate it and turn it on. But if you turn on Worldox Active Directory integration and you AD enable your cabinets, then the security in Worldox is also written to the Windows folders and files. So the security wouldn't just be at the Worldox DMS interface level, but it's all going to be written down to the folder and file permissions on the operating system so that you also have that Windows security as well on the back end. Now, in order to do this, you also need to AD enable a cabinet in order for the AD folder and file permissions to be written. So once you turn on Active Directory integration, then you have the second step of what cabinet do I want to AD enable, and you have to do that. And then also, just as a side note, please do not AD enable any legacy cabinets. Legacy cabinets are your cabinets that are set up to give you access to documents that were saved at your site before Worldox was ever implemented at your location. And those legacy structures have been in place for years, and you've probably set up various permissions to certain subfolders or files within that legacy structure. And if you were to AD enable a legacy cabinet, Worldox is going to take security control over that cabinet, wipe out the existing permissions, and replace it with Worldox permissions. So it's just best if you do not AD enable any legacy cabinets and just leave that legacy security model in place for those pre-Worldox documents. Okay, so that's the end of the slides. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into WD-admin and show you how you determine if Active Directory integration is turned on or not at your site currently. So if you go into Group Security, one, you should see this network tab. If you don't see the network tab, that could be because you're not on a network with a domain controller. In order to turn on the Active Directory integration, you need to be on a Windows network with a domain controller, so you have your Active Directory users and computers. And I'm going to pull down the network menu and go to Properties. And if you see Enabled and On, then your Active Directory integration is turned on currently. If this is set to off, that's currently turned off. If you want to turn it on, there are some steps you have to go through in order to do that. And since you're already up and running on Worldox, you're going to have to do that during scheduled downtime. Now, in order to AD enable a site, one of the first things you need to do is your indexer account. So I'm on my indexer PC right now. The indexer user account I'm using, I need to make sure that that user is a member of the Windows account operators group. And I'll show you that in just a second. Now, we also have this line here for putting in an alternate OU. And typically where we see this used is in our corporate and university sites. So you have your general counsel or legal department that's using Worldox, and they have a specific OU assigned to them on the network. And that's where the IT department wants these Worldox AD groups to be created. There's a few more steps involved when you set up an OU specific site. So if you're in an environment like that, corporate university type site, you want to AD enable your site, you really need to get with your IT department and your Worldox reseller and work in conjunction with them, because there's more steps involved with turning this on for an OU site than just putting the OU in this location right here. So if this is not enabled and I do want to enable it, before I do this, what I would need to do is, let me switch over to another PC. I'm going to switch over to my domain controller server, and I'm in Active Directory users and computers, and here I have my Worldox indexer account. And if I double click on this and go to member of, I see it's a member of the account operators group. So you need to make sure before you attempt to turn AD on that you make your indexer a member of the account operators group, and then go ahead and log off your indexer and log back on so it gets its refreshed permissions. And then when you go in and you AD enable it, Worldox will pop up a message in there asking you to confirm it, and you say yes, and it goes through the process, and once it's done, it's going to tell you to log off and log back in. And when it does that, it's going to go ahead and create some of these security groups in Active Directory, and you notice it automatically will add the indexer account to the WD admins and the WD indexers group behind the scenes as the installation process or enabling process of AD is turned on. So you'll initially get this Worldox FLS group created, the Worldox indexers, the WD everyone and WD admin groups. Then as you start AD enabling your cabinets or creating additional security groups in WD admin, it'll start creating these WD user groups and start populating them based on who's a member of that group in WD admin. So once this is set up and turned on, you're not going to go in here and manage these groups by adding or removing users from these groups. You can do all your administration through wdadmin, and wdadmin is then going to sync with Active Directory and make sure the right users are in the correct groups here in Active Directory. So now let me switch back to my indexer. And so if this wasn't already turned on, I've now made my indexer login account a member of the Windows Account Operators group. I've logged back in. I've gotten everybody out of Worldox. I've shut down all my Worldox applications, and now I want to AD enable it. I would go back into the network group and go into properties and then enable and on and click OK and follow the prompts on the screen. That'll make me log off and log back in one more time and turn the AD on. So once again, if AD is not turned on and you want to turn it on, you need to do that during scheduled downtime with all the users off the network, and just make sure that your indexer account is a member of that Windows Account Operators group. There's more information on how to do this in your admin guides in the Worldox Knowledge Base. So if you go into Worldox Knowledge Base, go into the Worldox admin guides, they'll have information in there on how to turn this on. And if you need help with this, get with your Worldox reseller. If you don't have a reseller, contact tech support and they can work with you on this. Okay, now as far as AD enabling your cabinets, those are done individually at the cabinet level. So if I go into cabinets, and I'll choose my client files, for example, and I double click on it. Once you turn AD integration on, you're now going to see this appear. If AD integration is turned off, you're not going to see this option here. It's just not going to appear on their cabinet. And then you check the box and save the changes, and that'll AD enable your cabinet within your environment. I already have these AD enabled. I already have AD integration turned on. But when you first turn AD integration on, it'll come up like this, and it won't be checked. You'll need to check that box, then hit the save button to actually AD enable that cabinet. And once you do that, then from that point going forward, as you start setting up ethical walls, or you block or allow the cabinet access to users, or you set up document security on files, then those permissions will get written by the indexer PC right down to the file and folder level in Windows. Okay, so that's a quick overview. I'm going to have additional videos going over blocking and allowing of cabinets, setting up ethical walls, and going over document security.